Hi, Mike Brinley, auctioneer. We have discussed before auctioneers selling something for a seller, for a client, and then the buyer doesn't perform. They either don't take delivery, they don't pay for the item, in some cases, you can't even get a hold of them. They disappear. And the question is, can you resell that stuff? Well, auctioneers don't own that item, so they can't resell it without what? The answer is your seller's consent. Because if title didn't transfer, and apparently even if in a loose sense title transferred, it's revoked in essence, because the UCC provides for resale of items where the buyer has breached the contract. And so auctioneer says sold for a car for $10,000. Buyer doesn't pay, buyer doesn't take the car, buyer can't get a hold of them, refuses to perform. Can the auctioneer and seller sit down and say, what do you want to do? And if the seller says, well, wait, I don't want the car, I wanted you to sell it. I know you got $10,000 for it the first time, didn't get $10,000 for it the first time, didn't pay. What do you want to do? Resell it. Let's resell it. Let's roll the dice again, see what we can get. Okay. So I asked an attorney in my market here, I said, what's the implications here? We've had a few cases of that with cars. She said, perfectly fine. The UCC has provisions for resale in a breach of contract. You can look at the UCC section 2703, 2706, and some other things in that area there that talk about resale and whatnot. And she said, as long as you do it in a commercially reasonable fashion, and the seller can participate in the bidding. And she said, I'm just reciting off the top of my head, but I think the seller can even keep any excess if it sells for more the second time, or can pursue damages if it sells for less. So I checked that, and she appears to be right. I have a link on my blog to 2706, which talks about the resale. And one of the material parts of that resale is commercially reasonable resale. Commercially reasonable includes 4 basic things: manner, time, place, and terms. And if that auction is commercially reasonable in how it's conducted, when it's conducted, where it's conducted, and the terms are reasonable that don't deter bidders but invite bidders, and the manner is done to preserve the assets so there's not further, for example, depreciation or harm to the item, or it's sold with other like items where those bidders would more likely participate or what have you. That's kind of in that manner part. Then the auction can take place, and the auctioneer says sold for $8,000. Seller's out $2,000. Could the seller go after that person for $2,000? Maybe. In a practical sense, probably not over $2,000, but nonetheless, that option generally exists. And as well, that if it sells for $11,000, she said, and I don't see anything contrary, that you probably could keep the excess. You're the one that breached the contract. So good for me. Sold for more next time. Now you had some holding costs. And could those costs be filled in terms of a damage from not getting as much the next time, and say, well, I had, holding costs essentially. And all that can be stirred into whether you can take a claim against that buyer for what you lost as a result of his breach of contract. So before you do anything as an auctioneer, I would invite you to look at section 2-703, 704, 705, 706 in particular that she pointed out would be 703 and 706 would probably, she said, as an auctioneer, that's probably where you're going to look to see those resale provisions. So if you're being told, well, no, you can't resell it, because now when you say sold, he owns it, I'm not so sure. I don't think it's entirely clear. And so I invite you to talk to your attorney. I talk to my attorney. You talk to your attorney and see what your attorney says about resale, right to resell, and taking excess or pursuing damages for coming in a little bit under. But it appears there's provisions in the Uniform Commercial Code, Section 2, 703, 706, and maybe something else right in that area, that provide for a commercially reasonable auction to resell and try to attempt or make an attempt to recover what's been lost. Mike Brantley, Auctioneer, pleasure to be with you today. Other videos on the same page, others forthcoming. Have a great day and stay safe.